Welcome to the SOTE of the Earth podcast. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus tells his disciples that they are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. But what does it mean to be salt or light? What would it look like to stand out from the world, provide flavor, and shine a light to those around us? And how can we follow Jesus' example for our lives? Join us as we learn and discuss what it means to be salty and to live more fully for Christ. Hello and welcome to the SOTE of the Earth podcast. This is episode number 24. I am Thomas Pope. This is Jonathan Cobb, and we have a guest today. We have, what do you prefer to go by as far as a name for this?
I prefer Matthew.
So I guess the timing for this one, this is coming out kind of right after the new year. And so we were thinking about, as far as topics, what people normally do with the new year. And it's a very strong time for beginning. So a lot of people make goals and things around the new year. They make resolutions to lose weight and all sorts of things like that. And a lot of times they don't go very well. Resolutions don't get met, or maybe people don't do it. And I just kind of felt like the time of year could maybe be used better as far as, you know, making the next year successful. So we have Matthew with us here, who is, I would say, kind of an expert. I don't know. He's very good at, he does a lot of goal setting and planning and sort of things, and not just making plans that don't be kept. He actually does a fairly good job, I would say, of keeping them. So I guess kind of starting with like our background on planning, what would you say yours is, Jonathan?
Well,
do you do much planning around the new year or any time?
I want, to be honest, I haven't really done much in the way of New Year's resolutions, but I do a lot of goals, targeted goals.
Okay. All right.
That's about as far as I've gotten in life.
Right.
And lately I've been renaming them as visions. But
You've been what?
I've been doing like vision boards lately.
Oh, okay. Okay. So goals, yeah. I at least in my mind, goals are on a higher tier than New Year's resolutions. Even if they happen around the new year, a goal just sounds like it's actually going to happen. A resolution doesn't. For myself, I guess I wouldn't say I've done a ton of goal setting or things like that. I have been more getting into it. This will be the second year that I've actually tried to make some sort of a goals for the year sort of thing. Well, I guess the few years going back too. Used to make what you would call the typical New Year's resolutions, and they never got met, so I decided I would stop doing it. I resolved to stop making resolutions. But yeah, so getting more into it, but looking to get, even better at it. So Matthew, you make goals and plans for the new year around this time. I know you're even talking about just actually scheduling time aside to make all those plans to be able to do that. Could you kind of give us like an overview of the type of goals you set and like how you go about that?
Sure. So usually I'm starting goals somewhere pretty much the fourth quarter. So somewhere, October, November, December is when I'm already starting to think about next year. And just to give you a little background on goals, we often think goals as just one thing we do, but it's actually, it's related to who we are. It is connected to our past, and it shows us what the future could look like. And so if you take goals, you're missing the whole point. It is about who you are. And so your past is what is the foundation you have, and then you have the goals, and then you have a vision or a future that you want to get to. And if you don't know that, your goals have only no motivation. So you're just making these goals hoping that you have the willpower to accomplish it. And rather than an internal motivation that this goal actually helps me become someone who I truly want to become. Like there is a desire in me to be a different person than what I am today.
That's a good point, because I think a lot of times goals are they're separate from that purpose side of things, and it's more just, I want to do more, and so I set goals so that I can do more, and it's kind of disconnected from the purpose side of things, from as far as like, who do you actually want to be? What do you really want to accomplish, more than just how do you do more?
Right. So you think goals as map. It tells you, shows you the map to get to the treasure. So you develop in such a way that you know what the treasure you're looking for. Right. And then the map makes sense compared to, I got a map, what am I looking for? I don't know.
So start with the treasure in mind.
Yep.
And then...
Yep. So since we are Christians, one of our goals, generally people don't know what their purpose is, but we all know we want to be Christ-like. Okay, that's a basic. Everyone has this purpose. We don't know details of what it means. So when I say, okay, I want to be Christ-like, then I ask the question, what areas in my life do I want to be Christ-like? Okay, so now I start with the top level, that is, I want to be Christ-like. Then I go down to another level and say, what areas do I want to be Christ-like?
Right.
So for me personally, I have selected 7 areas in my life that I want to focus. And it all starts with F. It keeps it easy. I start with faith, family, friends, finance, fitness, fun, and future. So I have these 7 areas that I have, and so within those 7 areas, then I start making specific goals within those 7 areas. Like, for example, sleep. I would function better with at least a minimum of 7 hours. So I need that goal because otherwise I don't function, and then I'm not Christ-like because I'm grumpy. Right. So 7 hours is the goal. I could put it in my faith because it helps me in my faith. I could put it in fitness. It doesn't matter where I put it because it could fall in any category. It's just that it's customized for me where I want to put it. But I have these goals that are specific to these 7 areas.
So the goals are specific to the areas. The area is all
towards
leading
the purpose.
Towards the purpose, which is Christ.
Yep.
And well, I guess in some way you could almost say like every goal could be in the faith category, for instance, because if everything's really pointing up towards Christ, it could all go in that category.
Exactly.
You just split it out to
make things
makes more sense because like otherwise you'd think like, how is sleep related to faith?
Exactly. Yeah, and I don't put sleep under faith. I put it under fitness. So.
Right. So could you give us, I guess, just quickly going through like what would be some examples of like each of those categories, just like
Sure.
1 or 2 things?
Yeah, so faith, one of my goals that I continue to keep on the list every year is to read through the Bible every year. And other one is reading books. I put any reading books as a category of growing in my faith.
Right.
And so next year I have a stretch goal, which is to read 30 books in a year.
Wow.
And so that includes audiobooks as well as, physical books, but that's the goal. Another one would be to memorize 1 Peter is a goal that I'm working towards. So those are some of the faith categories. Under family, wife and kids, I plan on taking my wife on a date once every quarter. That'll be a special date. We have weekly dates, but special date is once a quarter. And then dates, one-on-one special dates with my kids as far as camping or something, one-on-one with them. But I have a one-on-one with them on a weekly basis. The next category is friends. I really would like to do something with someone. I haven't figured out, still working on that. And I keep my eyes and ears open for opportunities. When someone says we're going on a hiking, I'm like, hey, maybe there's an opportunity for me to tag along,
Unless it's some of the things I'm doing and it's really hard.
Yes. That's how I got the opportunity to do ice climbing.
Right, yeah.
So that's friends. And then I have fitness. It took me 10 years to finally get to my goal of being under a certain weight. And so now I'm changing from weight to actually body fat percentage, because weight has no more sense. So now it's trying to reduce the percentage of body fat. So that's one of my goals. I like to bike. I've been thinking about what a new habit I wanted to create this year. And it finally dawned yesterday when I was going on my walk that I've really enjoyed walking this year. But it was something that I stumbled across more than, and so I was like, hey, that would be a good habit. And so now I'm thinking about, okay, what would it mean, and we can talk more about it, is what does it entail walking? So at a high level, I've decided I would do 6 days a week. So 6 times 52, 300. So I'm thinking 300 days out of 365 is my goal.
Okay, right.
So that's my fitness. My finance is, we're planning on a trip to go to India, and so that would be the big thing, is how much we can save. And one of my dreams is to be a very generous person, and so every year I try, and I use the word try because it's challenging, is to increase my giving by 1%. Because I heard about someone who gave 50% of their income.
Wow.
And so even, if I start at 10% right now, 50% is 40 years. I'll be an old man. But it's where do I end up, is just a good goal to have as far as being generous with my money. And so that's something I keep in mind. And then the paying off the mortgage as quickly as I can. So, those are some of the goals I have. For fun, I started last year, it's still work in progress, is to try to do something new every quarter. Mm-hmm. It's much challenging than I thought.
Yeah, we got the ice climbing in that one year.
Right, yeah. Yeah, like my friend has been saying, going to the Boundary Waters, that's something that he's been talking about, and I have never done that. So that might be something that I'm thinking of doing next year. And for future, it's basically many categories. Is one I'm thinking about this year is my 5-year future goals, not just for 2024, but what I want to achieve by 2029.
Right.
That would be another thing. And then as for the future goals is what should I be praying for the future, whether in a relationship to my kids, my wife, my church, just forward thinking by years rather than just the present.
Yeah. That's the kind of the category we're hearing it like future. What exactly does that mean? Because it seems like in a way goals are always tied to the future, but that's just so I guess how do you just see that future category more?
Well, some things are pretty obvious. Like my kids are growing older, that they're heading towards teenage, right? And so I should be praying in terms of my prayer life for my kids should already be starting to pray for other teenage stuff than little kid stuff.
Right.
It's no longer about obedience. It's more about their heart and the choices they'll be making. And for me, as far as career goes, is starting to pray and think about when do I want to retire from this job. Anywhere from 15, pushing 10, because I met a guy who said he's 80 something, and he's just said he retired when he was 55. I'm like, 55? Can I do that? And so, I've been thinking about it. I've been looking at my finances, just looking future. And so one of the things with my walk that I decided is that gives me half an hour, minimum of half an hour walk. That half an hour will give me time to think every day. So I'm not going to carry my phone. I'm not going to listen to podcasts or anything. I'm just going to go for a walk and just keep my mind open.
Mm-hmm.
So it could come in the form of prayer. It could be just thoughts, but basically time to think. You need the space and room to think, so new ideas and new thoughts can come into your mind. And I sometimes believe that's when God speaks to us clearly.
Right. So it's cool just to get an idea for, I guess, your system of things and how you have the categories. And even there you kind of talked about like the creation of some of your goals, like with walking, with wanting to start a new habit and like just thinking through what that looks like. It's kind of a process. How long does it, and I guess you mentioned you kind of the whole last few months of the year, you're thinking about it, trying to decide where you want to go next.
Yep.
So like roughly how much do you change it from one year to the other?
Not much, except it gets more and more precise. What the goals are easier. It's the steps to achieve the goal that's the harder part. That's where the work is. So if I use the example of, so my thought process was with the new habit of walking, the first thing is what would be a good goal? Measurable goal, right? You want a measurable goal. And so I said, 300 days out of 365. So then immediately my next question was, well, how am I going to measure that?
Right. Right, because if you can't measure it, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So then my thought process was, I need a checklist of monthly, daily. I got to go and check off. January 1st, done. January 2nd, done. Oops, January 3rd, missed. January 4th. So by the end of the half a year, I can see where I am and say, you know what? I need to go more walks because I messed up a lot and I'm not going to hit my 300. Or I can say, hey, I'm doing good. Keep continuing. So beside the goal, I have mini sub-steps or sub-goals to achieve my goal.
Right, because if you can't track it or make the steps, then it becomes a New Year's resolution, right?
Right, yeah. And I'm the kind of guy who loves to check off things. Like it's gives me a feeling of accomplishment each day that I did something. And so having a checklist is great. It's the same thing, people say, I want to memorize, and they memorize. But then a few months later, they've forgotten everything because they never go back to review. So, I had the same problem, so I had to solve that problem, so I created a checklist. Every month, I get to go and review all the verses I memorized. So I can say, I reviewed this month, I reviewed this month. And so then I have the whole year laid out as far as it's a monthly check off that I reviewed this this month more than a weekly or anything. So having that check off is the way you keep yourself on track. You're holding yourself accountable that, oops, I messed up. I see it clearly. It's evident compared to, I think I'm doing good. You have objective evidence.
Right, you have to be able to know. So kind of going forward from this, and you've already talked about this some already, but we're making goals, and everybody makes goals, right? But we wanted to bring in some scripture passages here because ultimately we think about making goals, and it can't just be done in a vacuum, right? There has to be purpose attached to it. And also when we think about plans or goals, we do not have perfect power to accomplish them. So I want to read a few verses here. Or do you want to read some of them, Jonathan, maybe?
So Proverbs 16:3 is the verse, commit your works to the Lord, and your plans will be established. And then Proverbs 16:9, going later on in the chapter, the mind of a man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps.
Right. So just in those verses there, and there's more of them. There's this idea of we have our plans, we have our ways, but you're committing them to the Lord, or ultimately you make the plans, but the Lord's directing the actual outcome of it. So kind of switching the conversation towards that side of things, and you've already mentioned some of it, but like, how do you involve God in your goal-making process as far as like, it's not just Matthew is making plans, it's Matthew is making plans and God is somehow part of it. Like, what does that look like?
So, when you're dealing with God, time, it's not a microwave, right? You just go put in 25 seconds, ding, done, got your information. And that's why I start my process so early, is because I'm spending time with God. I'm thinking, I'm praying, I'm trying to figure out if this is what God is leading me, this is what I want to do, rather than just do it. Because the goals are there, I can think about it, but because I'm involving God, it takes time. Because his timing is always impeccable, and it's never my timing, but that's how it works. And so starting the process early is only because I'm involving God. And that way I'm not rushing things. I'm giving God the time to think about it. I'm giving myself the time to think about it. No one is in a hurry, and we have time. And I'm not crunching to squeeze this in. It's more on God's timing. And so when I bring in God, it's that process of committing all your plans to Him, and He'll make your path straight. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I do is time. The other one is praying, is like, asking God if there is something that I should be doing. And I'm always looking for a verse to tag for the year. This year was, I think, being fruitful from John 15, pruning, and it sure has been a pruning year for me. And so somehow it doesn't make sense at the beginning of the year, the verse I pick, but by the end of the year, there is a very good relationship.
So kind of almost like a theme verse for the year. Yep. That you're kind of meditating on and trying to learn what it means and how it applies to you. Mm-hmm. And it just happens in a way.
Right.
Sort of.
Yep.
And then just giving God time to help you, because instead of just like sitting down one day, like making all your plans, which would be entirely or almost entirely you doing it, that time allows, God in various ways to guide the process a little bit, where it's not just Matthew.
Right. Yep.
So even say you've given it time on making your plans, and you've been very intentional about setting down the steps and how you're going to track it and all of that. We all know that sometimes plans aren't accomplished, goals aren't met, either because sometimes our own laziness or something gets in the way and it becomes unattainable. So how do you handle it when circumstances change, or when a goal becomes kind of out of reach? How do you handle that?
Well, when things go unplanned, you make new plans, right? And so if you start making, let's take the walking goal. I said 300, and 2 months into it, I broke my leg and I cannot walk for 6 months. It's possible, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So obviously 300 is out of the question. So I changed the plan to say, okay, once I heal, how much can I walk? And I accept it, because these plans are temporary, loose, it's flexible, it can be changed. It doesn't break me because I didn't accomplish. It just gives me the opportunity. Like I said, it's just a map, right, for the treasure. I might not get the treasure this year, but I'm still in the right direction, right? Because it's not a one thing, it's who I am becoming. And so we're talking years and years of having this system in place so that you're moving towards who you want to become, which is Christ-like. Mm-hmm. So plans changing is a common theme, and you have to leave room for God to work in your life.
Right. And I know you even kind of did that a little bit just with kind of giving yourself some margin there with the walking goal. Is you're not saying 365 days of the year I'm going to walk.
Right, exactly.
You're already kind of expecting, well, some things are going to happen.
Yep.
But I can still, as a whole, keep the goal of walking most days.
Right.
You know, that's
Yep.
what was that, 6 out of 7, roughly?
Yep.
Roughly.
Right. Yeah.
So you're building in some
Cushion.
cushion.
Yep. Yep.
Cushion.
Yep. Yeah, because it's a new goal, and I don't know how it'll go with my schedule because I got to change things. That's why I'm giving the cushion, but I wouldn't give a cushion for an existing goal.
Right, because you know
Yes.
how attainable it is already.
Right. And
Okay.
so then the existing goals would be where I start stretching myself. Okay, what can I do more than what I did this year?
Right, where the previous becomes the baseline, and you're
Yep.
trying to exceed it
Yep.
as time goes on.
Yep.
Going back kind of to thinking about like New Year's resolutions, which everybody makes, and so frequently you'll see them about like fitness goals. I'm going to lose weight or I'm going to exercise, and people buy all the exercise equipment, and by February or March it's completely unused. So trying to think of that, and like, because that's kind of the standard for New Year's resolution. Like that's what
Right.
we think of when we think of New Year's resolution. It's like, oh yeah, sure, good luck. Kind of sarcastically we respond because it's not going to happen.
Yep.
But we're talking about here about like we want to accomplish them. If the goals have any meaning, if there's any purpose behind them,
Mm-hmm.
like we want them to happen. So in your opinion, why do the goals that some people make never end up like being achieved? Like
Sure.
what's the main difference between people who achieve most of their goals and people who rarely do?
Yeah, there's a couple of layers to that. One is they make a very, very generic goal. I want to lose weight, and that's it. How much, by when, you know, what's the saying? You have to have a SMART goal, right?
Yes.
Specific, measurable, attainable, time, all that factor. And so people don't, they just say, I want to lose I want to lose weight, and that's it. They stop there, and nothing to measure, nothing to achieve. They don't know if they lost weight. The other is they try to overachieve. I'm going to lose 200 pounds by 6 months. You know, they might not say 200 pounds, but generally it's 20 pounds in 6 months. It's achievable, but for someone who hasn't even started exercising, to say that goal is impossible. Another thing is, even if their goal is very, very specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, they don't have a plan how to tackle it on a daily, weekly basis. Mm-hmm. Right? So you just have a top level goal, but no steps how to get to that goal. And then the other reason is because it's not tied to a purpose, there is no internal drive.
Right.
It's all will. Like you force yourself, you push yourself, you hope you'll get it done. And pretty soon, 2 weeks into the New Year's, you're done because you're running out of steam.
Right. It's not drive or purpose. It's just a motivation and emotions.
Right. Yep.
And because you don't have those multiple levels of kind of backup of sorts, it doesn't happen.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I can say all this is because I've done all the above-mentioned mistakes. You know, I've set up a goal and only to find it was just a wish list. And then, come up with, how can I make it a reality? And then I push it and make it specific, and then I lose steam because I was just driving to get it done and couldn't get it done. So now it's much more a system in place so that it pushes me, but it's attainable.
So I know, Jonathan, you've done stuff with SMART goals, right? Or at least you responded kind of to it. Or you're familiar with them anyway, right?
Yeah, it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time sensitive. It's, like Matthew was saying, it's hard to achieve a goal if you don't have all those established, or all those criteria established, because, you know, if you have something attainable but you don't have a time lock on it, you know. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I have any examples of SMART goals I've set off the top of my head, but I do like that model, and I feel like I have used it before.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, my goal is to memorize 1 Peter next year, right? So I got 5 chapters. And so I had to come up with a plan. Okay, how do I tackle those? And so what strategy I've come up with is I'm going to spend 5 minutes every day memorizing First Peter. 5 minutes. And because I get easily distracted, I have to keep an alarm for 5 minutes. I take my phone and I kept 5 minutes and hit go. So I know when my mind starts wandering, I look at that and say, I got only 3 minutes. I can focus here. And so that 5 minutes goes so quickly, but it is deep work. It's fully 100% focus because I have a time-sensitive strategy. And people can do that with the Bible reading, with prayer, with, set a clock and just say, hey, we all struggle with distraction, right? It's a normal thing of life. And even our phones can be a distraction sitting there. But if you can use it for your advantage, is to set up a stopwatch and say, okay, I'm going to read the Bible for 10 minutes. And you set the watch. You can actually start reading, and suddenly when you get distracted, you see the clock ticking and you're like, hey, I can do it. 4 more minutes. Let me go back to my Bible. It actually helps us to be focused on the task that we were called to do. And so that's what, people call it as deep work.
Deep work, as in they're deeply focused.
Yes. Yep.
And I know so it kind of keeps you on track a little bit, having the timer and going into it being specific with something like Bible reading, like something a lot of people strive, or they have this idea that they want to do more of. Sometimes their idea of how much is a good amount is way too much for something like that. Like maybe their goal is too much, but then they don't time it either. So they have no clue of like, am I doing a good amount of Bible reading or not?
Yep.
Like you can stress about it when you're doing a good thing. And you don't even know how long you're doing it. Like you just feel like you should be doing it longer.
Right. Yep.
When reality is, it might be better to just set a time, maybe even spend a little less time, but just feel good. Like right now, this is what success looks like.
Exactly.
Maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever.
Yep.
But not stress about it. Like, I feel like if I haven't had 45 minutes untimed,
right,
I've not done what I'm supposed to do. But make it actually attainable, because exactly when the timer's up. It's like, okay,
it's done.
I've done it.
Yep. And it's amazing, I was struggling with my memorization as far as reviewing it, and I was not getting what I wanted. And so I said, I'll try the timer. And so I said, okay, 5 minutes of new memory verses and 10 minutes of old review. It's just amazing how quickly that 15 minutes goes. And it's no longer in some ways you could say you're getting adrenaline rush because you're running against the clock.
Most people wouldn't describe things like reading the Bible or memory verses as being an adrenaline rush, but
hey,
if you can get there, that's probably a good spot to be.
Right. Yeah. and I think people do not realize the way God designed life is you have to learn to crawl first. And if you watch a baby, it takes time for it to crawl. Then it takes time to stand. It takes time to take its first step. It takes time to walk. It takes time to run. That's how God designed everything. And so everything has time. It takes time. And so it's the same thing with who we need to become and goals and what we want to achieve. It just takes time. And so sometimes we kill ourselves by trying to do too much, when maybe if we are just starting, baby step, right? If you never read the Bible and you want to read the Bible, don't say, I'm going to read for 4 chapters. Right? You could just change the strategy and say, I'm going to read for 5 minutes. If it's 1 chapter, great. If it's 4 chapters, great. I did more, But the key is to keep increasing as the years go by.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you were a Christian 20 years ago, you shouldn't be reading for 5 minutes. You should be have increased at least by a minute, so you should be at 25, 30 minutes now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what maturity is, right? You're crawling, but now you're walking, now you're running, you're becoming bigger and better at these things. And so that is the key, is you add little by little to grow. The tree grows that way too, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, the step by step, and I can say like myself, like growing up in the church, but then kind of reached a certain point later in teens, like college age, where I got more serious with it, feeling like, oh man, I've wasted some years, but now I'm more serious, and like wanting to be like super mature right away.
Right.
like oh, I should be there, right? Just like this thought, like, but not realizing like, well, it takes work to get there. Feeling like just the desire itself should produce the outcome, right? But that's not how it works, right? It takes time.
Yep.
So just because somebody becomes more serious doesn't mean they're immediately where they want to be, and part of becoming mature is realizing how that maturity works.
Right. Yep. And the key is contentment, because God is the one who makes us grow. So, we can make all these plans, but God is the one who makes us grow, right?
Right. The Lord directs the step.
Yep. And so learning to be content in the process. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at any story in the Bible, Moses was 80 years old when God called him. Joseph got into leadership position when he was 30. But by the time he forgave his brother, it was probably in the 50s. But it took that long for these men to become mature. Mm-hmm. And that's how God works, is it takes time. And so part of the whole process is not to get frustrated, but enjoy the process, learning to be content, and still be driven, pushing, growing as the years go by.
Yeah. Because it can be very tempting to see somebody else's maturity and want that for ourselves, but it's really a process, because if we're infants in Christ, it's like you were saying, we have to go through the growing up process into a maturity in Christ.
Right. I look at my mentor and I'm like, man, wish I could be as mature as him. Well, he's 70. He's got 30 years more than me. Yeah, he should be more mature than me, But I don't have it right now, but that's what I'm hoping, is to attain that when I'm 70.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So kind of going along with this idea, just reading another passage, which isn't specifically about planning, but we felt it kind of applied a little bit. Psalms 127:1, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards watch in vain. Mm-hmm. So kind of this idea where, I think it applies with planning as well, as unless we're thinking about God and he's involved in the planning process and really not just planning, but our purpose and what drives us, then what's the point? We're going to spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and we're just going to burn ourselves out, or get frustrated because we're not getting where we want to be. Whereas we need to just kind of be content to know that, if God is with us, then it's not going to be in vain.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of God's grace, because there's a lot of non-believers who set up goals and achieve it. It works for them because of God's grace. He sends rain and sun to the righteous and the unrighteous. Mm-hmm. He's generous God. But for us as Christians, we need to get him involved. It's not about us and our goals. It is about what he is working in us and through us. Mm-hmm. And that's why we have to seek his purpose and his plans for our life. And that's why it all connects back to what truly is our purpose. And we know that he wants us to be conformed like his son. And so that becomes the vision that we are pursuing, the treasure that we are seeking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know I think of like like in James chapter 4, talking about someone who's making plans for the future. We'll go into such and such a city and spend a year there and make money and whatever. And the idea there, the wise view is, well, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yep. What is your life?
What is your life? It's just a mist, right? You don't know what's going to happen. So you ought to be saying, like, if the Lord wills, you ought to be thinking, like, okay, we're making these plans, but also we have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
We have no idea, like, making plans for, 2024. We have no idea what 2024 is going to look like.
Right.
Like, us right now, it's still nearly a month away. Probably people watching this, it's already happened. If they even never see this, we don't even know. Will this video ever go live?
Right. Yeah.
We kind of got to take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt because we just don't know the future. But that's wisdom there, is we kind of realize that and then still make the plans and do what we need to do. But
yeah, we need to learn to hold our plans loosely.
Mm. It's kind of like a mix between wisdom and humility, which is similar, but it's humility to realize that anything we can do, God can change, but so we should make our plans in light of our lack of control over our own life.
Right. One of the things I like about this whole process is the planning. It takes a lot of planning, preparation to get good goals, mm-hmm. think through, make sure you are achieving. And it always comes back to a reflection of who God is. He's a planner.
Mm-hmm.
It says at the right time he sent his son, but he had planned it from the beginning.
Right.
Even before creation, he had planned all this, and then at the right moment he implemented. And so he is a planner, and that's something that I enjoy doing, is planning my goals and preparing and having the steps. You hear about these crazy athletes who prepare their meals for the next day and know what they're eating on each day. I'm not that crazy about fitness, but goals, that's what I do.
Just not that crazy of fitness goals.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So I guess we've already talked about it a little bit, but with as far as the idea of starting it out, we've already talked about like starting slow, keeping in mind there are these levels of making plans where you can't just say you're going to lose weight, because then you don't know when you've succeeded, you don't know what you're supposed to do, and you don't know when you're going to do it. It's probably not going to happen. So do you have anything else that you would say about, like, what would you suggest to a person who's just like kind of first starting out into being more intentional about making goals of some sort?
I would suggest that they would consider what is important in their life. What is important for you? Is it money? Is it family? Is it faith? Is it something else? Right? Once you identify that, then you can start developing goals around the most important things in your life.
Right.
If you don't know what is important, you could be working on a goal that adds no value to you.
Right. That's a good point. And I guess even in me kind of asking my question, it kind of betrays a little bit the thinking of, like, it's about what's the strategy behind making goals and how is a good way to start out. And then your answer is totally like, well, no, before you even think about that, what do you want? What's
important for you?
What's important, right?
Yeah.
And going back to what's the treasure that you're really looking for?
Right.
That comes before any sort of strategy, is figuring out that.
Right. Yep.
And my question kind of betrays that generally that's not how we think of things, right?
Yep. And it's what people call core value. What is your core value? If it's not the treasure, it's what is your core value? What are you really, really striving for as far as a core value? And so, even my 7 F's, it is prioritized in that order, like faith and then family. So if I have a conflict, I would stick with my faith than my family. If I have a conflict between family and friends, I would select my family. So that means if I have a date planning, and my friend calls and says, "Hey, I got this opportunity. You want to come?" Guess what? I know my answer already because I have said family comes ahead of friends. So my decision making is already done. I'm not going to get straight away with my friend's offer. I'm going to say, "No, dude, I got to go hang out with my wife." There's always exceptions to that rule, right? I could negotiate with my wife and say, "I'll take you some other time. This is once in a go." But in general, it's the same way between family and work. Family comes first. So if my boss says I have to work extra, I would call my wife, figure out a way and agree on it, and then go to work, So having that priority, so understand your components, what is important, and then prioritizing them is so important. That way you're not spending your goals on the least priority items, but the most important priority items. So for us, faith would be one of the big priorities in our life. So most of our goals would be heavily leaning on that faith category.
Right. Well, that's pretty great. So, and then it's only after you have all that figured out, that's when you start thinking of like, okay, now what? How do I get more specific?
Right. Like if someone says, "You know what, family is more important," you could even break it down. Okay, when you say family, what do you mean by family?
Like wife, kids,
or
extended family.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And you're like, "You know what? Wife and kids and parents, that's it. That's what I'm talking about." Okay, great. So now question is, what do you want to do in relationship to your wife? Well, generally guys would say, I need to listen to her, I need to understand her, I need to spend more time with her. That is generally the guys' approach when it comes to wife, right? Assuming you have a healthy relationship with your wife. If you don't, then there's a whole nother category, right? But assuming you have a healthy relationship, then how do I spend more time with her? And so you're like, okay, what can I do to spend more time? Well, I could do a weekly date. That might be too much if you're just starting, right? So it's like I could do a once a month date. Right? Okay, so this year I'm going to do 12 dates with my wife. You could stop there and say, okay, I'm done.
Right.
But really it's like, when? How is this going to happen? So you then start looking at baby steps and say, okay, every third Friday I will take my wife out for a date. Now it's very, very specific. You know when you're going to do it. It is third Friday. So when your buddy calls, you said, "No, dude, I got a date with my wife." And it's measurable, and you have a plan. And then the next layer would be is like, what are the 12 dates that I need to do? Because it's not just going to a restaurant every 12 times, right? You want to do something different. So you could keep digging until you're running out of options. So that's why I'm saying it takes a lot of thinking before you put it onto the paper.
And that's why you take time with it, and you also want to start slow, because if you are putting that level of thought into every goal, you can't start with 100 goals.
No.
It's not going to happen.
No.
So like even just starting with like, okay, maybe like absolute baby steps. So you have your 7 categories, like what's the top one for each category, and that's all I'm going to figure out right now.
Yep.
And then maybe I'll add more a few months from now or whatever, but like starting something like that, because most people don't put that level of effort into their goals. Maybe that's why they don't get accomplished.
Right.
But if you do that, like, you shouldn't burn yourself out, because otherwise you're going to just spend all this time planning, and then you're going to be like, oh, you're going to be sick of it.
Right. Yep.
So.
Yep. And then, once you have those goals, then you can look at your daily, weekly routine. What do you need to do in order to accomplish those? Like, how do you orientate your life to get those accomplished? So then you can have a weekly rhythm, a monthly rhythm, a yearly rhythm. Rhythm is what you're looking for. Is like every Mondays, this is what I do. Every Tuesdays, this is what I do. Every Wednesdays, this is what I do. So that means you're saving a lot of time not thinking what to do on a Monday night.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do?
and there's also some of the benefit of starting slow and expanding as time goes on, because like for you have all these goals already that you don't need to think about. Like all you're thinking about it for a new year is like, okay, is there any way I can stretch this a little bit more? That's
Right.
all you're thinking.
Yep.
At this point, you don't have to think very much about most of your goals. It's just the few new ones. Those are the ones that time goes into, but the rest of it.
Well, so in theory, yes.
Okay, I oversimplified maybe.
No, but you're right. But part of the problem is because I'm a human, because I can be lazy, because I don't achieve my goals, then I have to review why I failed achieving these goals and then refine those so that I can achieve it next year.
Right, so I guess for the ones you're already successful in, it's simpler.
Right,
If you're not succeeding, then you still need to go back to the drawing board. Sort of.
Do a root cause analysis on what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Wow, well, that kind of comes to the end of our questions, but I feel like there's a lot of good stuff here as far as, doing it purposefully and more than just making the plans, but actually getting to a place where you can accomplish them. So I feel like there's a lot of good things here. And especially the ideas of it all comes back to the purpose. It all goes back to what's important, what's the real treasure. As Christians, our treasure should involve getting closer to God. Should involve.
It must.
It must. Otherwise, we have some serious rethinking of things to do. And so hopefully that's helpful to anyone who's watching or listening to this. Do you have any closing thoughts, Jonathan?
No, I really like that map analogy because it's a fun way to think about that. Is all of our goals just pointing towards the end goal, which is becoming like Christ. So.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much for doing this. This is good. We appreciate having you on here. You're, I guess, an expert. We'll say you're more mature on this than us.
Well, I appreciate the time. Thank you.